In this video, I want to talk about the actual assignment of writing a profile paper for the Real Life Superheroes website. I want you to think of your paper as a column, and that helps me present these divisions so that we can just see it at a glance. I have something already prepared here that can help you just with the basic form of this paper. So if you haven't written a profile before, or if you hear this and you decide, yes, I would like to do it that way. It's a very basic, plan. Um, there are other ways to do this paper. And if you want to deviate a little bit from this or form your own organization, start with something different, that's okay. I'll look at your submission, I'll read it, and if it creates interest, maintains it, rewards it in a unified way, if you stay on track and there's flow and it's a good read, I'll let you, you know, come up with your own way as to how to organize it. Experiment with that. Take some risks. I don't know if that's how you want to do it. You're welcome to try. This is sort of a good baseline structure. And once you kind of get the feel for this, then I think it would be perfectly fine for you to experiment and to do different variations of how to organize your paper. If you feel you already are there and you want to just jump to an experimental structure, go right ahead. But let's go ahead and talk about this so you can kind of just get the basic notion of what I'm looking for, okay? And again, if you want to write your paper just following this plan, you're welcome to do that. All right, I think that's a good start and a good thing to do if you're kind of unsure as to how to write this and you want to sort of just follow this, this outline. All right, so these are sections, and I like to think of any sort of work that I have to do, or I definitely want you to get into this habit of thinking in terms of sections and paragraphs. All right, so within section one, you will have at least one paragraph, right? But you might have more than one. So I'll let you figure out how many you want to put in there. Again, same with section two, you'll have to have at least one, but you can have more. Section three, I definitely expect to have more than one paragraph here because this is the heart of the essay. We'll talk about this in a second. And then section four, again, at least one paragraph, but maybe more than one. Because this is the closing section, I really wouldn't expect more than two paragraphs. I think one would probably be fine. Same as section one. Section one is your opening section, okay? It's very important to go ahead and do whatever you can to create legitimate attention and an interest in your work, okay? So remember, create interest, maintain it, reward it. And let's link this up with this idea that I've often presented to you, this sort of scenario where you have a leisure reader. In other words, this person doesn't have to read your work, and they come across it on a website or in a magazine or on their phone or whatever, they can quickly scroll away or flip the page if you don't capture them. So you have to figure out how to really become a sticky writer. You got to make their attention stick to your work. And the very first thing to do is to work on your title for that and the opening sentences. All right. Now, I started off talking about section one as your opening. It definitely is, but let me go ahead and talk about the title, and then I'll continue on with section one. Just to kind of stretch you a little bit here, I want you to work with a one-tiered title. Now, depending on what sort of other essays you've done for me at this point, you're probably working with two-tier titles, and that's fine. I want us to try to work with a one-tiered title now. So what is a one-tiered title? It's very simple. It's just the main title, if you will. It doesn't have a subtitle. All right, so you have fewer words, and the vast majority of, for example, magazine titles and items on a website, if they get titled, it's going to be a one-tier title. If you look at newspapers, whether online or in print, all of those titles are one-tier titles. So you just get a headline, so to speak, and let's see what you can do with that. Okay, pretend it's a headline. What would you put up there? All right. Now, I would suggest that you open up with a real story about one of these real life superheroes. This means that you're going to have to Google their name, um, or see if there are other sites out there that have information about real life superheroes. But it would be really good if you can find someone who's recently made the news. Okay. Now, if you Google Phoenix Jones, you'll find out that you might find some information about him to use. It doesn't have to be super recent. It doesn't have to be something that say happened this month or this year. But can you find a story about one of their activities? All right, and can you write it up in a way that can create interest, create a with that sort of start, right? You can start with something very concrete, very the flow is just sort of naturally, it rises organically from the flow of the historical event. When I say historical event, I just mean a real thing, right? It happened in time. It really happened. Here's the sequence of events of how it unfolded. And so I think that would give you a nice way to really introduce, if you will, color, concrete detail, flow, movement, in your essay to again create interest in what you're going to bring to the table with the rest of your work. Now I put the word anecdote up there. That might not be the best word for this. Uh, an anecdote is a personal experience that doesn't have a lot of factual evidence. So it might have happened to you, but you actually don't have it recorded. You don't have a way. You don't have it archived. You don't have a way to. You didn't turn it into a document. You see what I'm saying? And so I have a lot of experiences in my life as a teacher, right? And I can be talking to someone about what it's like to be a teacher in this place at this time with these students, and I might say, yeah, uh, here's an experience I had, and I could share it, right? But um, that does have some weight to it, doesn't it? I mean, it certainly has convinced me because I've lived through that experience, right? But the person who's listening, probably should consider a lot of things. Is this person's memory correct? Is this person, as he's telling me his experience, he's sort of hyperbolic? Is he exaggerating? Is he getting a little too excited or a little too angry, or a little too whatever, and is that coloring his memory? Is he's saying something about this student or that student. Did they really do that? Or were they really that good, or were they really that whatever? So there's a lot of things that you need to remember as you hear an anecdote, right? Because it's simply one recollection, one personal experience. Now, a little time out here, if you will. Many times students will try to use their own personal experiences to support an idea, or to they'll try to use it in their essay. And I think that's fine if you use them in the right spaces, right? I think the best place for a personal experience, right, an anecdote, or is at the beginning as an opening, or maybe at the closing, or maybe somewhere tucked away as just one example that's not really carrying a lot of weight in terms of evidence. I would never try to anchor a main point or my thesis, or something that I really was trying to establish. I would not anchor that on anecdote or on a personal experience, because although I might have become convinced about something in that event that happened to me. I'm just one person, and how do I know that my experience is representative of you know of a larger group of people that are going to have similar experiences? So I might have a horrible experience, for example, at a certain store, and then from that one experience, I might talk very loosely and freely, and I might actually convince myself that I need to stay away from that store or that franchise or that whatever. Hey, but that was just one experience. What if the person that was serving me was having a bad day? What if I was having a bad day and I just miscolored things, I misinterpreted things? What if someone else? What if I actually did have a bad experience, but someone else went to that very same store and had a great experience? You see what I'm saying? Um, Nothing actually becomes evidence really until you have numbers behind it. This type of thing, this sort of experiential thing, doesn't become public evidence until you have numbers behind it. Now, it could be private evidence, and there are some things that have happened to each one of us, I would bet, that have utterly convinced us about the truth of something, but we don't know how to really share it or convince others because it seemed to have been a private revelation or a private experience, right? And so that evidence has worked for us as a private individual, but it can't really move into the public sphere because another person might say, well, I actually didn't hear that, or I didn't take away that, or that wasn't my experience. You see what I'm saying? Or so an anecdote, it's got some pros and some cons, right? And I would not use it as sort of a main support of any sort of thesis or premise I was trying to establish. But you definitely can use it as a part of a collection of parts, to build something. I think it would work great up here, especially for something like this. I mean, this whole thing that we're looking at with real life superheroes is kind of weird. I mean, it's kind of funny, it's kind of fun, it's kind of I actually do not know what I would think if I saw one of these people. If I ran into them in the halls or in outside somewhere. Part of me kind of can respect someone that does this. Part of me um, that doesn't know what to think about it. Part of me thinks it's probably maybe childish, but uh, I do things that other people might consider that way too. Maybe bewildering, right? And I think that if you can convey all of that up here, this sort of topic we're on sort of lends itself to an anecdotal opening. Okay, so see if you can find something about Angle Grinder Man. See if you can find something about oh, Phoenix Jones, as I mentioned before, or Captain Ozone, or Captain Jackson, or Queen of Hearts, or Oh, by the way, as you're looking at the website, you should scroll down, right? Don't forget that you have multiple pages here. I think you have like 8 or 9 pages of superheroes to look at. So uh, pick one and then just take the name and Google it on a different window and see what you find. And see if you can come up with an actual real life event that you can describe. Okay. Now, it would be good up here if you mentioned the source somehow. You worked it into your text that you found this at the New York Times or the Washington Post or this website. I'm talking about the event that you're going to use to open the paper. Now, once you get that done, right now that might be one paragraph or two. I think three's pushing it, but two maybe. I think you might be able to get it done in one. But it's time to transition through to the next section. Now, the reason I block these off as sections is that as I think through this, as I imagine what it would feel to verbally present this to an audience, I can feel the movement, right? I mean, here I'm just focusing on getting the story done, and after the story, I want to move on to the fact that this person involved in the story, right, is one of a larger community, right? See, I'm moving on to the larger community now, so I feel that's why there's a section break and another one coming on, and that's what. Let's go ahead and mention that there. Let's go ahead and say something like, this person seems to be unique, but in fact, they are part of a larger community. They call themselves the real life superheroes. They have a website, and mention the website. Okay. So I want the website's title, and then in parentheses, I would like you to put the URL in there, okay? And talk about how this is their archive, that this count the superheroes, I don't know how many you have on those 9 pages down there, in the gallery. Go to the gallery and then count them. Bring, that's something you can put in here, is how many people are there, how long they've been around. See if you can find the dates in the archive, or, somewhere on that site, can they tell you when they started? Maybe it was 2011 or 2007 or 1998. I don't know. You take a look, see if you can find that, right? So describe the website, right? Now, we're going to move on to the next task here, the next part, right? And this really is the heartbeat of your paper. This is your profile. Let your reader know what you're doing. Let your reader know in terms of, say something like, as I spent time on the website, I noticed that many or most of the real life superheroes share some commonalities just through their photos. Okay, so you need to go ahead and make sure that you let your reader know that really all you the one of the main thing you basically did was just work through their photos. Okay, and we're going to talk about that down over here in the complications of your observation. But tell them that you perused the photos, you examined the photos, and that you came up with a few commonalities that you saw quite a few of these real life superheroes shared, and then just go ahead and describe your commonalities. Okay, and I think this needs at least 2 or 3 paragraphs, maybe even 4. I would say 3, 2 or 3. And don't remember, please, that when you know as you read for this class, as you read books, articles, information, your research logs, all that sort of thing, um, pay attention to what those authors are doing with paragraphs, for example. I mean, you're going to run across short paragraphs, you're going to run across long, medium-sized ones. Every now and then you run across a nice long one. You're going to run across paragraphs that include indented material. You're going to run across paragraphs that have uh, lists in them, pictures in them, all sorts of things. So, whatever you see happening on the published material that you are reading, you can imitate here. So when I say that, this needs 3 paragraphs, one of those paragraphs might be very short. I don't know. They don't have to be exactly the same size. They can be also different types of paragraphs. So be creative and don't think that I'm asking for, don't think about paragraphs as if there's only one type of paragraph and that's a certain size and it does a certain thing. There really are quite a few paragraphs. If you want to again, if you want to maybe go back to other things that we've looked at in this class, if you're taking me as a student in the class, you know that I've given you other articles to read for other essays and all that. Maybe you can pull up those articles again and just look at how those authors work their paragraphs. You know, maybe up here, if you want to start with a couple of very short one-liner paragraphs that really bring the shock of the event home, and then a bigger one that describes it. Technically, because anything that has white space between it, like even one sentence, if it has a white space above and a white space behind after, as far as digital tests go, that can be counted as a separate paragraph. So some paragraphs might have only one sentence in them, and you're welcome to try to experiment with that if you wish. But anyway, this is the meat. This is where most of your writing is going to take place, right? And then once you provide your description of the typical real life superhero, right? Um, then it's time to close. It's time to close your this essay, this assignment. And I think one of the good ways to close it, because the content, the material that you're looking at allows you to take this path, is to tell your reader, these people, as are people, humans are complicated things. These people are complicated. And although I'm speaking as if I'm writing this, right? Although I did see commonalities that a lot of real life superheroes shared, I saw smaller groups or subgroups, if you will, that seem to deviate from the average description. All right. So whatever you really focus on here, we'll call it the average description. But can you talk about the fact that this is not an absolute thing, and that although many superheroes share many of these commonalities, there's not a single one that shares them all, and there are plenty of exceptions. And down here you can talk about some of the exceptions you've seen. For example, I know that in my head I do have an average, an idea of the average superhero, right? But I also know that I see two other subgroups kind of developing, kind of framing themselves into existence as I look through these photos. And for example, one is the real life superhero that really does take themselves seriously, but still is not dark. Okay, so some of a lot of the superheroes seem that they're finding a relief valve. They're just a way to have some fun with some friends, a way to to dress in a costume and to put on a mask and just to go out and meet people and take some pictures and become a personality, you know, in the community. All right. And you're not really trying to stop major crime. I mean, you're not carrying a gun, you know, you're not carrying weapons. You know, if you are carrying something, maybe it's a chainsaw. Yeah, I don't know why Captain Ozone was carrying a chainsaw, you know. I thought trees would probably be good for the environment. What is he cutting down, you know? So maybe I need to look into that, but it's not a weapon, you know. Ankle Grinder Man's carrying something, but I know Polar Man isn't Polar Man walking around with a snow shovel because yeah, he wants to shovel people's snow, you know. But but by the way, if I'm mentioning these names and they're not familiar to you, maybe it's because you forgot that the website has multiple screens, pages. That gallery has a lot of pages to it. Just scroll all the way down and click to the next page. Maybe you just stay focused on one page, and that's a problem. You need to look at all those pages. But anyway, um, you know, there are some superheroes that really do have armor, you know, that looks like it could stop a knife or even a bullet, you know, definitely rocks. And yet the armor does seem to allow them a lot of mobility, right? Because sometimes you're going to find a real life superhero on there that's so encumbered by their armor, you know, and it's like they can't. I don't think they could even move their head because their helmet's going to fall off, or they got such dark glasses. How can they see anything, you know? So that's to me that's just still sort of this playful approach, right? But you do have some that seem like they really are ready to try to stop minor crime, and they're limber. Their uniforms. What I'm saying is, truly seem to be designed for effective protection, and they're carrying low grade weapons like a stick or a you know, something, you know, that is actually a weapon, or is used to you know, incapacitate someone, to hurt someone, to stop someone from doing something bad, right? Um, but they still don't look like they're going to scare kids. You know, I mean, you can still see that they're people and they're you know, they don't look demon or crazy or fearful or horror. There's no element of horror to them. Okay, all right. Um, so maybe down here I could talk about the group that really do seem serious about fighting crime. Now, Phoenix Jones would be one of these. Again, you should maybe just try to find him on one of those pages and then just read about him. But see, I also noticed that there's another group. Now, it's not like a major group, but it's a group unto itself, if you will, within this website. And this is like the horror show, you know. I mean, think about, for example, Black Monday Society or Dr. Discord or let's see, the Green Scorpion, Insignis. Go look at Insignis. You know, um, if a if a lost 7-year old, you know, was crying on the street of Chicago because they lost their parents and they didn't know what to do, okay, or whatever, you know, Captain Jackson might show up, and the kid is not going to run away from Captain. The kid, you know, the he might be wondering what's going on, but I think Captain Jackson could actually help this kid. You see what I'm saying? But if, you know, Dr. Discord showed up or the Black Monday Society, I think that little 7-year-old is going to be permanently traumatized for the rest of his life. So some of these are they don't I don't know what to make of them. You know, I mean, they might say they're trying to help people, but if the Green Scorpion shows up, you know, and tries to help an old lady cross the street, I think that old lady's going to have a heart attack. You know, um, what are they doing? You know, and I'm not writing your paper. I'm not going to really go into that, but I could mention the fact that in closing, right, I'm going to qualify if I'm going to I'm going to make sure we understand that, you know, as a that I wasn't trying to make you know, an absolute definition. You know, when you define something, all right, that's a very tight analysis, because when you set up the sine qua nons, okay, the sine qua nons means the without which no, it's Latin for without which no. In other words, without these things, you're not whatever the thing we're defining, right? those are class characteristics. I mean, those are very strong. If you don't have them, you're not that thing, right? These commonalities are it's a much softer analysis, all right? Uh, and you want your reader to understand that, right? You're not, you're not presenting your observations as absolutely watertight and absolute, that everybody has to have these things to be a real life superhero. Down here, you might show that it's a little more complicated than that. The things get fuzzy, you know what I'm saying? They get fuzzy in a couple directions, but that that this is still a pretty good basic idea of this type of real life superhero. And if you want, you don't have to mention this, but if you want to kind of understand what I'm saying here, if you want to think about playing the odds, right? Um, if after we looked through this website, right, and you saw the number of people on there and what they did and what they looked like, if I were to tell you one day in class, hey, I have one outside in the hall, they're out there and the door's shut, let me open the door and let this person in, right? But before I do that, let's go ahead and let's guess what this person is going to look like. And I think as a class, we might start guessing, right? And we put some things we'd expect to see, right? And I think we would all bet on this, right? Now, there's always the chance that here comes Citizen Smoke, or Life, or some Life is a superhero, um, that comes in here, and blows us away because they didn't look anything like we thought they would look, right? But that chance might be one out of a 20% chance. There's maybe a 70% chance that we're going to hit it, right? Maybe the other 10% is like some other subgroup that we saw. I don't want to get all into that right now, but maybe you can qualify your observations. I think that would be a good strategy to close, right? Because you need to close. You need to figure out a way to end it so that your reader knows what's happening and knows that you're wrapping things up. You see what I'm saying? And if you start qualifying your observations, they know that you're done with making those observations, and now you have some side comments about what you've done. You see what I'm saying? So again, these are suggestions to just help you get this thing done. There are other ways to do it. There are other ways to close. Like if you want to circle down here, you want to circle back up to the story and bring it back down again. That circular motion. Sure, you can try that too. But anyway, this is something to get you started. If you want to just go ahead and use this, this is your map for the assignment. And here are some minimums. I would like it to be at least 700 words long. And I need a word count statement there at the bottom, right? After you finish it all, I would like to see just, words equal 752 or something. You know what I'm saying? And then I think 6 paragraphs is the minimum. Spread them out here, but maybe 6 to 10, 6 to 8. And then, but 6 is the minimum, right? And then I would like at least one picture. At least one picture. Now, here's a question I often get from students is, well, how do we document our sources? What you want us to do with that? I want you to weave the documentation into your narrative, okay, into the sentencing. So, your one documentation here is the website. Why don't you mention it up here by name and give the URL? That's enough, okay? And if you actually want to document the story, just go ahead and work it into your sentences, just as a news reporter would, or just as you see it in the newspapers, okay? All right. Now, I know I'm going to close up here. Thank you for watching. It's always like a 30 to 40 minute commitment when you get one of my videos, and I appreciate that. But let me just make one more observation about writing. It's a twin. You're never going to know writing unless you know reading. You've got to do both together if you want to grow as a writer. If you're here just to pass the class and get the grade and move on to other things and you really have no long-term interest in writing, I actually can understand that, all right? And I don't want to say anything negative about that because maybe that's actually what you need to do. I don't know what your life story is. I don't know what your goals are, okay? But if you really do kind of discover that you're liking literacy, you're liking writing, you're getting into this, then I got to tell you, you have to be reading deeply at the same time that you're writing, because you learn from watching and then doing, okay? And the way you watch writing is to read stuff that has made it into publication and has lived in that realm. In other words, an author that has written 2 or 3 books, Newspapers that have lasted. You need to be, once a day. Why don't you just open up the Wall Street Journal on your computer? You don't need a subscription to read an article or two, or CNN, or read stuff. I would prefer that you read books. You learn a lot from that. You learn punctuation, you learn diction, you learn uh, structure development. You can see these things happening, and you get a little more confident, right? And you pick up methods and strategies. So please, keep that in mind. Those of you that sense sort of a growth happening, and you're learning how to think as a writer, and you're excited about that. I would say next step, you got to be a reader. They go together. They truly do. All right. You can't do one without the other. So you got to be expert in both. Okay. Well, that's my spiel as an English teacher. I've done it. I've thrown it out there, and it's time to say goodbye.